Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, today is day 7 of Plant-Based Telehealth Week. So we thought we would have the founder of Plant-Based Telehealth to wrap up the week, none other than Dr. Laurie Marbas. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for introducing me and introducing all your wonderful doctors during the week.
Well, thank you. That was a wonderful week to do, to be a part of such a wonderful group of people, and then to share with them on your show was such a delight. So thank you for having us.
Well, it's great because I think that if somebody is hesitant to book a consultation with plant-based telehealth, now they can actually meet 7 of the doctors. And so if they were having trouble deciding, you can see which one they resonate with most, of course, assuming they are licensed in the state that the individual is in.
Exactly. And that's a good point. So the way telemedicine works, and we get this question often, is, well, why can't I see this doctor? Well, that doctor is not licensed in the state you would be in physically at the time of your appointment. But let's say that I've had this happen. I had patients who lived in Oregon, but I was licensed in Washington before I was licensed in Oregon. Someone would actually drive. I've had patients drive 2 hours to be across the Washington border to see me via telemedicine, because the appointment actually is considered occurring in the state where the patient is located at the time of the appointment. You don't have to live in that state, but just be present. And we do that because medicine is lovely and complicated in this country, but we want to be very compliant, and we also want to, be providing the care that we know that patients need. So we're doing everything we can to do that.
Why do you think that is, that you have to be licensed? I mean, there's 50 states. So why did that come to be that once you're in medical school, that you can only practice in that state? Was there a reason for that, you think?
Well, the way medicine is run is that each state decides, one, what are the requirements for someone to be licensed in their state. There's a very big variance in that. So you may have one state not require any continuing medical education. You have other states that require a significant amount. There's one that costs $75 to renew, and there's others that are almost $1,000 to renew. They renew once every year, or once every 2 years, or every 3rd year. I mean, I'm licensed in all 50 states and DC. So DC even has its own. And I think Puerto Rico requires more. I haven't done Puerto Rico or any of the territories, but it's a very complicated and very administratively stressful thing to do. And the reason we did this was so patients who are in places like the interior of Alaska or South Dakota or Wisconsin, where there are no plant-based doctors to be had in the state, much less down the street, they can see someone from the comfort of their own home.
I did not realize you were licensed in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. So in a way, you're a one-stop shop. So if somebody likes you, and why wouldn't they could go to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of the few physicians in the country that actually licensed in all 50 states and DC. The last I heard, there was less than 20 of us.
That's amazing. So did you have to take like 51 boards?
No, that they accept all my board certifications. So I'm board certified in family medicine and lifestyle medicine, but some states like Texas requires a jurisprudence test, which is basically an ethics test. And there's, I think, 4 or 5 of those. But there's not necessarily tests, but you have to be fingerprinted. So I always tell people, like, listen, I have been fingerprinted more than most criminals, because you have to be fingerprinted for all these different state licenses. And it is quite a crack up. And then there's others, you may require a letter from references, others don't require it. It's a racket is what it is, basically.
Well, that's amazing, because you could literally live in any of these places now and
yes.
get a job.
Yeah, absolutely. I could, yes, if I wanted to go to a brick and mortar, but I enjoy seeing my patients actually in their home. It's such a more enjoyable experience for them and for me, because I can really see kind of the environment that they're living. And many times I'll get family members, spouses, kids. I've had parents, grandparents join, and always an occasional dog or cat too. One time there was a bird.
Love telemedicine too. And because number one, you don't have to drive, fight for a parking space, pay for parking. I remember when I lived in LA, just to see the doctor at Cedar Sinai, I mean, it was like $20 to park. If you could find a parking space after you fought traffic for an hour to get there. And I think you're so much less stressed when you're doing telemedicine.
Absolutely. And it's just so much more comfortable for everybody involved. And I feel like the patients, honestly, my goodness, 5 or 6 years now of doing telemedicine experience, I really believe that I provide better care for what I do, not necessarily something that needs hands-on experience, obviously, but I really feel like it's a much better experience for both of us.
Right. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about what things people should seek a telemedicine, especially a plant-based telemedicine doctor. And like, obviously, if you have if you were run over by a car, that's not the time to do telemedicine. Maybe while you're healing though.
Right. Yes, I've had some really interesting experiences on telemedicine and sent people off. I've even had to dial 911 myself for someone once. And so lots of interesting things can occur via telemedicine, but ideally, these are individuals who are stable. That's the first word. And if it's an emergency, like you said, dial 911 or take yourself to the ER. But ones that work really well, especially a plant-based physician, why someone would want to seek a plant-based physician is you're tired of the care that you're currently getting, right? So let's say that you're just constantly getting prescriptions, your doctor's not open to looking at other ways to potentially reverse or dramatically reduce medications through lifestyle management. And you've heard about this thing called plant-based diet, and you're like, how can this help me? And you hear these wonderful stories of diabetics reversing their diabetes, type 2 diabetes, that is, or hypertensives getting off their medications, people losing weight, gut health improving, sleep, skin, you name it, all these amazing things. That is perfect, right? So you would make an appointment and we discuss it. And, if you have blood pressure, we have you have a blood pressure cuff at home. If you're diabetic, I love using continuous glucose monitors where I can see all of your data 24/7, your blood sugars. And we talk about that. We do medical management, we check labs, and it's a wonderful thing. You can connect to us via messaging between appointments. And it's just been a really nice care. And honestly, patients are just so thrilled that one, they have access to someone who's willing to listen and take a deeper dive into their health versus someone who's just like, here's your script, I'm following the guidelines. I need to give you on this medication, this medication, this medication, see you in 6 months. That tends to be the recurring theme of the patients.
Right. And people don't realize how short their appointments really are in person until they have a telemedicine appointment. And plus all the waiting time by the time, that's the one thing I love about telemedicine is generally the doctor is pretty much on time within minutes. I can't ever remember seeing a doctor where, oh, sorry, he's running, 45 minutes late. That's normal, for in-person medicine.
Yeah. Well, it's hard too, because if you think about what occurs in an appointment, so the physician, may have a stack of patients to the day. And if, I always tell patients, you want to be the first patient in the morning or the first patient in the afternoon, because then you're going to be seen on time, unless they're delivering babies or have to be on call and go admit someone from the ER or something, which has happened, which I've done in the past. But the interesting thing is, yes, you're right on time. I think when I run my patients on telemedicine, I might have been a minute late at the most, maybe 2, but that's rare, very, very rare.
Yeah. So do you have almost every specialty yet, or will you? Because a lot of times what people are looking for are those specialties. I always hear, especially they want gastroenterology and orthopedics and gynecology. Do you have any of those, or what specialties do you have in your?
Well, right now we have family medicine. We have Chris was a previous an ER doctor, but she's also integrative. And we have an OB-GYN, Dr. Fontaine. And so we have those. It's a little bit harder. We've had some discussions with some specialists like cardiologists. There is obviously a pay differential. And so that sometimes can be an issue. However, we're looking at ways to think outside the box and maybe bring in consultants as not necessarily a group. Our doctors would be in a group visit and maybe have someone come in and talk to our patients as a group, like a specialist, like a kidney doctor or an endocrinologist or, a cardiologist or GI doc.
That's what I get a lot of requests from in plant-based is because
GI.
I'm bloated. That kind of thing. They want to see a GI doctor. That's yeah.
But our doctors can handle a lot of GI issues as well. So, if we feel like this is out of our league, we will certainly refer you to a GI doctor locally or somewhere else.
What is the wait time to get a telemedicine appointment like compared to I know sometimes, gosh, to see an in-person doctor here where I live, sometimes I've waited 6 months to get an appointment.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that does.
I'm personally booked out about 6 weeks, and that's just because I have so many licenses and I'm the kind of the catch-all. But my other doctors, I have other doctors who have license in like 25 states, and that you could easily see them either this week or next week. And so you can even see Dr. Clapper.
I know
Dr.
that.
Clapper.
Isn't that incredible? I love that because when he left True North, that created such a missing for people that he was their doctor. And I'm like, hey, he still can be your doctor. I had friends that had a consult with him. He's just, well, he, as you know, he was on the show this week and everybody loved Dr. Clapper. He's a legend. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I feel like that just kind of gives us an extra little boost. Like, you work with Dr. Clapper. I'm like, I've had patients, it's really funny. So they're in another state that Dr. Clapper is not licensed in. They're like, well, I booked this appointment because I wanted to see Dr. Clapper, but I'll deal with you. I'm like, okay, no problem.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
It's funny.
You know, I think that people that are vegan or plant-based should have at least somebody on their team that knows something about plant-based nutrition or lifestyle medicine. Would you agree with that?
I think so, absolutely, because we just kind of, I think we look at the potential, right? And so we're going to be looking at what we can do, what can a plant-based diet do? Because it's a powerful tool. Now, it's not a panacea, but it is a powerful tool. And we may be able to see benefits that a regular physician would not, because they just don't have the experience of having to stop insulin in 3 days. So those are some incredible experiences that you have with time working with patients with this incredible diet. So that is there. So I think we can provide hope, but we also look at the holistic picture of prevention. I have a lot of patients coming for, maybe they were diagnosed with osteoporosis, even, before they were plant-based, or they were said, you're hypertensive, you need 2 more medications instead of just the 1, or they're diabetic and they just continue getting worse, or maybe they're diabetic and not getting better on a plant-based diet. And then that's a whole nother case. So I get tons of patients from Cyrus and Robbie. They've been sending me patients even before plant-based telehealth, because there's some really interesting things that occur. And so I feel like diabetes is my specialty type of thing, because I get so many. But what is that experience? What does that mean? So a lot of people go, well, I'm type 2 diabetic, I'm going to go on a plant-based diet and take care of this. Well, maybe they get, they still struggle. There may be an issue of, maybe they're a late onset of an autoimmune type diabetes. What is their pancreas? There's lots of things to look at. So when things aren't fitting, that's the other thing too. We look at you as a whole picture. What is all the meds that you're on? Where can we reduce that? And I've even caught several pretty serious diseases. People came in for one thing, and I'm looking at this from the whole picture going, something else is going awry here, in finding things that weren't expected for the patient. And so again, we're also getting some pretty sick patients. Well, I think I was really surprised at the acuity or the severity of the illnesses that we're getting. But if you think about it, patients are desperate. And so they're like, maybe they can help me. They've turned all other rocks over and there's no answer. And, it's been a really humbling experience working with these patients.
Do you ever help them talk to their doctor? Because let's face it, would you agree that even if you have you as your wonderful telehealth doctor, that people should have a local doctor in case of emergency, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to replace the primary care doctor. That is not our intent at all. If anything, we consider ourselves consultants. We're lifestyle medicine consultants. However, many times what will happen is that we end up taking over the chronic disease management of certain things like the diabetes and hypertension, not everything, but certainly some of the more common ailments. Now, if someone's struggling with their physician, we are happy to speak to them. I have yet in all these years ever had that happen, because most physicians are going to have 2 responses. One is, keep doing what you're doing. Great. I don't care. Just keep doing it. Someone else is managing, they get all the credit. So great. So when the insurance are coming back and seeing them as their primary care to this patient and they're getting better, they get all the credit for reimbursement. So if they're on a value-based system, so that's actually great. So we're benefiting the physician, which is phenomenal. I always want to help our fellow physicians. And on occasion, not very often, we'll get someone who gets a bit defensive and we'll tell the patient, kind of in an angry tone, well, I don't think you should do that. I don't agree with that. And that's to be expected because there's egos involved. And I just tell the patient, well, just book out your follow-up for your diabetes another 3 months, put it off, and you can go back feeling better. And then maybe they'll be a little more open, or you just don't tell them what you're doing and we'll take care of the rest.
Do you ever
So, yeah.
Did you ever either help the patient talk to the doctor or talk to the doctor? Because like you mentioned, like you love working with people that are diabetic. And one of the things I hear over and over, and like, I'm not a doctor, so I can't really address this as a doctor or would, but like they'll be diabetic, like usually type 2, and they'll go, well, every time I eat starch, my blood sugar goes up. Well, I mean, every time you eat food, your blood sugar goes up, but a regular doctor treating diabetes would tell that patient, well, of course you shouldn't eat sweet potatoes,
Right. Absolutely. I help them align them to the discussion, like what their doctor's thinking. So I think that's the helpful thing is like, this is probably what your doctor's going to say or think or do. And, it really depends too, because sometimes the doctor doesn't never even ask them what they're eating.
Most of the time, I think.
Right. So if that's not an issue, then don't bring it up. So, but if your doctor is very involved, they should honestly, most of them are very open to it and they're open to learning. And many times they'll ask us, so what is your other doctor doing in regards to what am I telling them or saying or doing? Many of my primary care doctors who are managing diabetics do not put their patients on CGMs or continuous glucose monitors because most of the time insurance won't cover it. But I'm like, but honestly, if we only even had it for a month, you're going to learn so much about yourself and making these food choices, and it reinforces better food choices. So when they go out and eat the vegan fast food, they see blood sugars raised for 2 or 3 days because of the high fat content and everything else going on, versus cooking at home and eating compliant meals, blood sugars dropping, they're moving into the direction of reversal. That's really encouraging. Their other doctors just haven't taken the time to become educated or just don't have the time to do it because they're just required to see so many patients. So yeah, there's lots of ways to address it. It just depends on the patient's what they want to do. Sometimes patients feel abandoned by their doctors, literally because it's like a 10-minute appointment and they're out the door. Others have a long-standing great relationship and they just need a little coaching on how to discuss it with their doctors.
I could have sworn I saw a continuous glucose monitor at Costco and it really was not that expensive.
Yeah, the continuous glucose monitors, they're prescription. And at the most of the Freestyle Libre that I've seen, cash basis was about $150 for the month. Many times you can get a prescription savings card or your insurance will cover it sometimes. And that can get down to either free or maybe $50, $85 for the month. It just really depends on where you go. But Costco is a good place to go if you do have one or need to get one or prescribed one without insurance coverage.
It sounds like, I love measuring things. It sounds like fun. Maybe I should try one just for
I would
see.
Please let me know.
Because,
I'll get you one.
because I eat a lot of potatoes, and what do you say to? I'm sure you've had patients that come to you and they're fairly new to a plant-based diet, and they say, "But Dr. Marbas, when I eat potatoes, my blood glucose goes up."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it depends on how high the blood glucose is up, because you've got to remember every patient is different. So we're in different stages of insulin resistance, and if I have someone whose blood sugars are running in the 400s, we're putting them on insulin and we're trying to eat lower glycemic foods in the beginning. But I always remind them as we move along, we'll start testing things. So you try the potato. If it goes up too high or too much, then we'll just hold back for a second. Or maybe you go walking afterwards. There's ways to manage it. And we make food choices based on the data of what their body's doing. It's an unemotional thing. It's like, here's the data, the body's telling you what it's doing. So we make different choices or we stick with what we're doing. And many times patients can eat the potatoes and not be a problem, or the bananas or whatever it is that they enjoy, the pineapple, the watermelon, because their body rapidly responds. But then there's others, it's a little bit of more of a struggle, because patients feel uncomfortable and they get very anxious with high blood sugars. So I'm trying to be very sensitive to where the patient is. For me, I get more nervous about low blood sugars, as we should. So we have to be very careful about that. I was like, listen, the bigger deal here is that we don't want you getting on too much medication. So we deprescribe. So that's the other beautiful thing about a plant-based or lifestyle medicine physician. We become experts in deprescribing these medications.
Right. Well, when people come to me diabetic, I always say they should see somebody like you or Cyrus and Robbie
Yes.
as the disease or that treats the disease, and
Yep.
not just necessarily say, well, I can't eat these foods, because maybe you can't eat them right now, but that doesn't mean you'll never be able to eat
Oh
them.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. That changes, and it's usually within a weeks to months that happens very quickly because people's insulin resistance decreases. It depends on their compliance with the low fat diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that even if they're not board certified in lifestyle medicine, that most plant-based doctors are in a way lifestyle medicine doctors, whereas
Yeah.
not necessarily all lifestyle medicine doctors are plant-based doctors?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. You're exactly right. So if you're a plant-based, if you see someone who has experience and they're claiming themselves as a plant-based physician, they understand the value of the diet. And that is honestly the biggest win because then you have someone who's willing to work with you. And of course, we're all learning this. So, I've been a physician for a couple of decades, but I've been working with as a plant-based diet doc for 10 years. So that it took time, right? So I learned a lot that first year. So, there is a learning curve, but the beautiful thing about plant-based telehealth, and I will tell you, nowhere else in the world that I'm aware of will you have this many physicians who work together and have a brain trust like you have none other. And we have thousands of patients now with labs and experiences and looking. So what we're learning and seeing and trends, we like this morning, when we talked, if I talked to a doc about a different patient and they're bouncing off each ideas, or at our monthly meetings, we have collaborations or we teach each other something, or like, oh, here's this, here's that. I mean, there's some pretty phenomenal conversations that occur. I'm like so excited to learn from my other doctors. You don't get that anywhere else. So when you plug into plant-based telehealth, you're plugging into not just one physician, but multiple physicians.
Honestly, if I didn't have a doctor that was this close, that was both plant-based and lifestyle, I swear I would go to you. That just sounds, I just would love it for all you guys to be discussing me over your Zoom. Maybe you could have like a patient of the month,
Well, we actually have quite a few conversations about patients, and that is really fun. And I will tell you, because I've worked in many different scenarios. I was active duty. I was worked in a small hospital. I've worked in large academic centers. You name it, I've done it. What was interesting was the collegiality, right? So it's a little bit different. I feel like the most that I had was when I was in the military, because we learned to function as a team in very stressful situations. But other places in civilian sector, it's not like that as much. And the beautiful thing about starting your own practice like this is, like, I was like, listen, no one's coming on board here. This one is they're smart. These guys are so smart. Oh my gosh. And two, they're compassionate and kind. And three, they're willing to collaborate and grow this as a team, because I really need us to work together as a team so that we can make this better experience for not only the physician, but also for the patient. And when you do that, when you take care of your doctors and you build this team and they feel cared for and loved, they're going to just pass that on to the patient, and everybody, it's a win-win for everybody. So
Right. So how does it work? Like, say, for example, labs, because when I tell people to go to you or just have telemedicine, they go, well, it's too expensive. My insurance doesn't pay. And, I don't know what to say to that, but,
sure. Well, when Anthony and I launched this March of 2020, we really struggled because we had to find a price point that, one, we could run a business, because it takes a lot of time and it's very expensive to become credentialed with all the different insurance carriers, which we want to eventually. We're just not there yet. We bootstrapped this together. It was me and Anthony. That was it. And there was no investors. There's nothing else. It was literally just the two of us. And the thing to remember is that money that we're charging, that $150 per half hour, is one, to run the business, but also pay the physician. And you can get what we call a super bill that you can actually submit to your insurance company, except Medicare, which is against the law per Medicare. That's nothing we did. That is strictly Medicare. they can submit it to their private insurance and get reimbursed, hopefully something. And many insurance companies are moving forward to that reimbursement. And we've had plenty of patients saying, I'm getting to see you for free. My insurance company is paying for it. I'm like, fantastic. Now, when it comes to prescriptions and labs, we use LabCorp or Quest, which are national. We can order anywhere in the country. Bill your insurance. You can bill your insurance. They may or may not cover everything depending on what we're ordering. You need to understand, I'm going to be ordering things like B12, selenium, iron, homocysteine, methylonic acid, all these different things to make sure nutritionally that you're sound in your diet, or maybe something else is occurring. So there may or may not cover that, but at least they should cover some of it based on the diagnoses that we attach to that lab order. Now, sometimes we're also working on getting discounted labs for patients and where to go. So that's in the works. So we're hoping that also improves as patients come to us that don't have insurance. And then the pharmacy, you bill your insurance too. The only thing you're paying out of pocket at the time of the appointment is the appointment. Everything else can be billed through your insurance. And so if you don't have a LabCorp or a Quest near you, which occurs, like I have patients in Hawaii or Vermont and some other places, the other thing you can do is actually take our lab order that we have and then take it to a local lab and bill your insurance that way. That works as well. I've also ordered DEXA scans. I've also ordered coronary artery and calcium scores. You just go to a local imaging center. It's pretty straightforward. We can do quite a bit.
Wow, that's amazing. Are the appointments an hour long? And it's not like people are coming every week necessarily, right? So even if it was an investment at the beginning,
yeah, it's so we have half-hour and 1 hour appointments. So a half-hour appointment's 150 and a full hour is 300. Dr. Clapper's a tad bit more based on his experience. And so that is the cost. I do encourage new patients to do a full hour just because there's usually so much to cover when you're first getting to know someone. And now I have had some patients in the beginning who were very ill, like for example, on hundreds of units of insulin, on multiple medications for hypertension and other chronic diseases that, yes, I needed to see them a little bit more often than maybe once every 3 months. So sometimes I will see someone weekly, and honestly, they're moving towards health so rapidly that becomes less of an issue. And again, they're submitting these to their insurance companies. But that it really just depends on the patient. I have some patients that I see once a year because, they're healthy plant-based eaters. They just want to make sure nutritionally that everything looks good. And sometimes I have plant-based eaters that think they were doing well, still on hypertensive cholesterol meds. And then we check some things, and I'm looking at their diet and their other habits and tweaking some things, and they get better. And so again, this is the beauty in it. With our experience and the knowledge of all these docs, we can make some pretty radical changes in people's lives if they're willing to actually implement them.
Right. That's the thing. If they're willing to implement it or not, and knowing and doing are often two quite different things, aren't they?
Yes. Oh, yes. And so honestly, one of my favorite things is to learn about is behavior, right? So how can I help someone understand their emotions, their behaviors, and make better decisions? And I really feel like that needs to be, our physicians really need to be well versed in speaking to a patient so that when they listen, when they hear those words, that it really pulls those levers that will drive them to make better choices.
Yeah. When people say, well, it's too expensive, I say, well, good health is priceless. And when people are on medication, that's not cheap either.
No, it's not. Gosh, this was several years ago. I was running a lifestyle medicine clinic in Western Colorado, and I had one diabetic. She stopped some oral medications and she saved her ACO. So this is they have limited funds for everybody in that program, or in that insurance program, I should call it, that limited funds. And when we stopped her oral diabetic meds because she got better, it was $800 a month. Now you multiply that times thousands of people. Now we're talking, that's amount of money that will make insurance companies turn their head and go, what's going on here? So if you're a small company and you're paying out a certain amount for people, like we have talked to large companies that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on their employees because they're so chronically ill. Either they're missing work or their visits. I mean, there's some crazy stuff. I mean, people are so ill just based on the lifestyle choices they're making. So much.
Yeah, absolutely. Just hypothetically, since you all live in different states, could somebody see you in person if they lived in the state you are? Or is that not an option?
I personally don't see, I actually have patients who live in my same town who I have not met, which is interesting. I don't have an office, but I've had a couple of patients who were coming through Colorado because I live literally right here in the mountains, not far from the Rocky National Park. And they're like, can we stop by and see you? I'm like, absolutely. So we meet for lunch, and it's been a blast meeting them in person. Some of my physicians actually do have inpatient practices as well that you could certainly see, like Dr. Pierce. I'm not sure if Dr. Colin Zhu does. I don't believe so. And I know some others are working on getting in person. So it just really depends on the actual doctor themselves.
Great, thank you. What about international, Dr. Marbas? Because I know you're licensed in 50 states plus Washington, D.C., but if somebody from a country outside the U.S., could they do a plant-based telehealth?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way medicine is regulated in the United States, it's again, if the patient's in the States, in the United States. Now, I've had patients in Canada, Switzerland, Mexico, France, Africa. And so it's some really interesting stuff. We've had them all over the world. We're not necessarily, practicing medicine because we can't order labs, we can't prescribe medications. But what we do is we can provide some advice. And many times these are Americans that are abroad. So it's a little, that's why they're seeking us. But sometimes they're also international folks that actually live there because they don't have anyone available. And what we're doing is giving them advice. Okay, ask your doctor about this, talk to them about that, and just giving them some guidance on those things. I've had a couple from Switzerland who called about, their children and asking about supplements and certain things that were going on in the home. And that was fine too. And now they actually connected. They'll send me a message if they need anything too. So
that's great. Where is the farthest you've ever consulted with a patient? Meaning that where they
Australia? I guess that's the furthest. Yeah, it'd take a long time to get there. So I'm thinking in a plane.
But I was wondering, were any of your doctors speak languages other than English? If there was somebody in maybe in a Spanish speaking country or a French speaking country that wanted plant-based telemedicine, do any of your doctors do other language consults?
Yes, absolutely. That would not be me. I struggle with English sometimes. So Dr. Kim Schroyer, she speaks Spanish and she signs. We've actually had our first deaf patient on plant-based telehealth, and they're doing fabulous, which is way cool. And then also we have Dr. Jeff Pierce, who speaks Spanish. And we also have Dr. Elizabeth Fontaine, who speaks French. So there you go. Yes. So
I wonder if Dr. Zhu speaks Chinese.
That's a really good question. I have not asked him, which I need to. I'm assuming he may. I don't know for sure though.
That's another angle for people that are looking
absolutely
for that type of service,
Absolutely.
Where do you think that Western medicine gets it wrong? And what I mean is, and this is why I'm really passionate that people, if they don't go to you, okay, but get a plant-based doctor if you're plant-based, or you'll be driven crazy by things like, for example, like people, this is what I hear a lot. So they'll be on a whole food plant-based, no oil, maybe SOS free diet, and they're doing great and their weight's great. And then, you get this emergency message. Well, my doctor said my LDL's too low. And the thing is it's not too low. It's just that it's normal for the way we eat. I'm not so good with that analogy about if you don't have garbage, you don't need garbage trucks, and the LDL is, you can probably say it better than me, but these are things that you can explain to people, that some of the things that your regular wonderful doctor sees on labs, it's not you don't have to have the alarm sound, because when you're on a plant-based diet, these are normal labs for us, for example.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there are a few examples. You will see HDL, which is your good cholesterol, drop along with your LDL, right? So as you stop eating all of this cholesterol laden food coming from animal products, your liver will just make the cholesterol that it needs typically, and that HDL will drop. And, certain things that will bring that back up or a little bit would be exercise. So even people, let's say, for example, we can talk about my own. So my LDL is like 60. My HDL is also above 60, but it's always been that way, but I'm very active. So exercise will bring up your good cholesterol as well. So, sometimes though, if I have patients who already kind of started with the lower HDL, you'll see it drop further. And they get very nervous about that. I was like, listen, you need less garbage trucks, right? You have garbage, now you have less garbage, you need less of the garbage trucks to haul it away. It's okay. But if you're really nervous, just get out and start moving some more, which is always a good thing. And the other thing is that I've had come pretty often is sometimes their BUN is low. Again, you're eating a lower, not as a highly processed diet, and also a tad bit lower protein. You're not getting this massive amount. The other thing that will sometimes come back lower is your white blood cell count, which tells me that you're eating a very low inflammatory diet. Okay, it's all good. And we actually had that question. I can't remember, I was on another podcast and someone asked, they were just outside of normal. Now their doctor wanted to send them to an oncologist and get some type of bone marrow. I was like, you don't need to get your bone marrow removed to see if under the scope if something's going on with you. You're just eating a plant-based diet and now you have low inflammation. But yeah, to think that someone wants to give a biopsy of their bone, I mean, just because they're just outside of normal, when they don't understand this is how we eat, that's what will lead us to a low inflammation state, which shows up with low white blood cell counts. Because if you'll see someone who's chronically obese, you'll see someone with high WBCs or white blood cells. You'll see them run around 10 to 11. And that just tells me there's so much inflammation, which is literally the breeding ground for chronic disease.
Yeah. Somebody needs to either write a book or a cheat sheet for this type of information where the traditional doctor, to bridge the gap, I think, because
honestly, yes, I really feel like we should have, all right, click, you're a plant-based eater. So this would be considered normal. And so people don't get so alarmed. And honestly, we need to be looking at what Americans are saying. It's okay to have a cholesterol just under 200. No, it's not. Having heart attacks. They need to adjust that down to where we are for everybody. So everyone will start paying attention to, one, what are they eating and how are they addressing this and saying, oh, you're okay. No, you're not okay. You're walking time off. So anyway.
That's the thing. It's skewed to people that are eating Lay's potato chips on the couch. And I just wish there could be a book, a cheat sheet, a webinar, so that the people that are doing the right thing don't get so alarmed when their numbers are not like their neighbors who are overweight and sick.
Exactly. And especially for my diabetics, right? So you'll have their doctors tell them, especially if they're type 2 diabetic, they're like, oh, you're under 7, you're good. I'm like, no, you're not good. You're not reversed. You're not off meds. What is wrong? I was like, I have a little higher standards. I'm sorry. I'm going to push you a little harder. And yeah, it's actually quite alarming, because now I've probably seen someone I'm pretty sure I've seen someone in most every single state at this point. And just the different levels of care has been pretty alarming, right? It's just to see there's some amazing doctors and then there's care that is not good. I'm just like, okay, I need you to probably find another local doctor if you can. I mean, I don't like doing that, but on occasion I feel like my patients, care is threatened and that it can make a big deal for them. So I just, yeah.
But, sometimes I think it's hard for people to even know if their doctor's a good doctor, because we're not doctors. You know what I'm trying to say? Like I know how I feel, and I how I'm treated, of course, is important, and whether I like the person but as far as, people, the white coat, they're a doctor. This is what they said. And I think it's very hard for the average patient.
Yeah. I would say one, of course, it's personality. Do you get along with them? Because if you can converse with the physician, that's huge, because they have knowledge, right? And they should be able to share that with you. And I don't even say they might be the book smart, the most intelligent doctor, but if they can't convey that to the patient and that patient build confidence in that relationship, they're not the right doctor for you, right? So you need a physician who's going to take the time to take the knowledge that they went to school for and learned and pass it on to you and let you make that decision together. And that's what the other thing I'm always talking about patients is like, listen, my goal is for you to get off as many meds as possible. And if that means no meds, beautiful. But if it means we need a little bit of meds, that's fine too. But what we're going to do is take all the data, look at you as a whole person, and let you decide together. If you want me to put in more of a little weighted decision, that's okay too. But let's just walk through this together on what's best for you at this point in your life. You might have made a different decision 10 years ago, or you might make a different decision 10 years from now. But right now, what is the best decision for you? And it's, that's how that conversation should be occurring. And that's the gorgeous part about plant-based telehealth, is that I can have this conversation, not in a rushed manner most of the time, in your home. You've already been at home, you're sitting in your comfortable space, you're able to speak and not worried about other people around you for the most part. And yeah, it's been a wonderful experience.
I have to tell you something that I think you'll think is really funny. So I moved to the desert from LA 3 years ago, and the main hospital here is called Eisenhower, and there's a thing called My Chart. So everything's there, which makes it nice, because then if you go to like one specialty, everybody can see everything, which I think is great. Back in the day, you'd have to call the doctor and fax and whatever. So and the patient has access to it too. So in it would have like any medications you're on, your visits, your past visits, your lab tests, and any medical history, right? So like it'll say things like, for example, I'm hypothyroid. So in my conditions, do you want to know what they list one of my conditions as? Vegan.
No way, really?
Condition, because I thought that was hilarious.
It's funny. Well, I mean, there is some benefit to having that being proclaimed, because your insurance companies might cover certain labs if they understand that you're vegan, because they consider you at risk for certain things such as B12 deficiency or whatever. So yeah, no, it's actually, it depends. So the ICD-10 codes and ICD-9, again, medicine is here in the United States is made to be complicated.
So there's so few here compared to LA, both people and doctors. I just found a dietitian that I feel like they almost feel like it is a disease.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Because I'm the one that's like, no, sorry, no mammogram, no colonoscopy. It's like so I'm the difficult patient. And that's why if you're me, you have to have a plant-based doctor, guys. Even if it's like Dr. Marbas says, once a year to check in, so that they can kind of be the overseer of everything that's going on.
Yeah. And, and we look at your risk factors and different things and say this lab would be beneficial or this one you don't necessarily need. Yeah. So we're always trying to understand that or at least in my practice or my values, is that I don't want to order things. One, if it's going to be changing how we're going to manage your care, or it's just something that patient really wants to know. And I find that's really interesting. I didn't do this when I was a regular physician. I never did not order something that a patient requested. If a patient requested it, I would find a way to order it, because I really feel, at least lab wise, maybe not imaging, because now we're talking thousands of dollars in radiation that might be an issue. But when it comes to labs, if someone really wants to know something like their blood type, or they want to know, their insulin antibodies or C-peptide levels, okay, let them know. Why wouldn't you? And patients get so frustrated because their physicians aren't even willing to have the conversation. They're like, I'm not paying for that. I'm not going to order that. Your insurance won't cover it. I'm like, well, if the patient's aware of that and they're willing to cover the cost of the labs, then order it. There's nothing wrong with you ordering labs to help a patient understand what's going on in their body.
Well, it must be so gratifying to be able to spend that much time with a patient. And I'm not bashing local doctors. I have some really great ones here, but they see so many, they have to see so many patients. They don't have I think the longest visit I probably ever had in person was 10 minutes.
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, no, that's unfortunate. But yeah, so administratively, we have to understand where medicine's evolved to, right? So we used to be able to, we'd hang up our shingle, see our local little patients in the town that we lived in. As medicine evolved and it became more difficult for the single practitioner, then they went into groups, private groups, and some still do that, especially the specialties like OB or ortho. But then as it became reimbursement became more of an issue, it became harder and harder for doctors to run their own practice because it's very expensive to have a brick and mortar. You have to cover insurance, you have to cover your employees, there's all these different things you have to cover. So then they were being hired, right? So then they started being hired by larger institutions, either let's say like Kaiser in California or a hospital setting. And now you have people who are not medically trained, you have administrators who are dictating what needs to happen to stay afloat, right? So you'll see, for example, cardiologists pushed to do more interventions because the way we are reimbursed is procedurally based. So let's say that cardiologist will make more money by one going in and doing some type of, let's say they cath the patient and put in a stent, which wouldn't even necessarily make a difference in the long-term outcome of that patient. They'll get paid more than if they spent 30 minutes talking to them about a plant-based diet to prevent further decline in their health. So that's how that's happened. So now in my type of care, which is primary care, we do some type of interventions. I might stitch something up or take a mole and send it out, for, path to look at if I was worried about something, or maybe I would set a broken arm or do a pap smear or something like that. Those procedures are slightly a little bit higher reimbursed. But for the most part, I'm doing this. I'm talking to the patient. We're managing medications. We're discussing their mental health. We're discussing all the things that people come to their primary care doctor for. I get reimbursed lower. So what do? The top brass are going, you got to see more patients because we got to make more money. So it's not the quality of care or the outcome that's being measured, it's number of patients. And so now you have that, and you have all the administration. You're on the phone with insurance companies, you're on the phone with you have to get something approved through the insurance company. You're also, I have so many friends who are physicians who would see their allotment of patients for the day and then go home and spend 2 or 3 hours actually, finishing up the notes and ordering everything because they just didn't have time because they're seeing so many patients that they couldn't put it together during the time of the appointment. And that's what doctors are dealing with. So it's no wonder that physicians are extremely burnt out, and we have the highest suicide rate of any profession. It's a really big deal. So when I get docs on our platform, I want them to be happy. I want them to not feel rushed, and they dictate how many patients they see. They dictate what days and hours they work. There's nothing there that we do. That is completely up to them. And they're being reimbursed at a rate that they can make a living that would be comparable to a brick and mortar. And so that is the difference and plus lifestyle medicine, guess what? People just get better, which is why we went into medicine to begin with, to get people better, not to keep them sick. Oh my goodness.
No, it's backwards. And I do feel bad for doctors. I mean, they must have an incredible amount of stress the way the insurance companies have things.
Yes. My daughter is now a physician. So she graduated medical school in May and she's in her family medicine residency in Boston. And she's quickly learning. It's like, well, kiddo, there will always be a space here for plant-based telehealth. She's like, well, this might happen.
So telehealth. Who's plant-based? The physicians, the patients? Like, for example, do you have to be plant-based to see one of your doctors?
No, you do not have to be plant-based. I have some patients who are not plant-based. They're plant-based curious, or maybe they were referred by a family member. They want to talk about a separate issue. And of course, I'm always pushing my agenda. All of our physicians are plant-based. However, if you are not plant-based, you can't come see it. You can't work with us.
Well, that's the kind of discrimination that I like. And the reason I ask that is because you never know who will see this broadcast. Right. And if they are a physician and they're interested in this type of, endeavor, could they contact you?
Oh, 100%. I have spoken to so many physicians, well over 50 at this point. Some were just not in a position to leave or join. Others needed more full-time work, because we're still small. We start out typically part-time. And others that after we spoke, they just decided it wasn't a good fit, or I decided it wasn't a good fit. So I'm very picky. with my doctors. So just
What
throw
I was
it out there.
thinking is like, this would be a good thing because, I was just thinking like there might be some plant-based doctors that are retired,
Yeah.
but this might be a good fit because maybe they don't want to go back to work full time, but they have
Yeah.
breadth and depth of knowledge of the plant-based diet, and they might be in a specialty where they could be of service, and I think that would be so cool because I think what people really want, like you say, is you need one, like every specialty you need one.
Yeah.
You need a dermatologist, you got to get that GI doc, because I'll tell you, Dr. Marbas, I think the number the email I get is looking for a plant-based GI doctor. That's like everybody wants one.
Yeah, and it makes complete sense, right? Because where is that food touching? And if your gut has not been used to all that fiber, and there's so many things that can go on in the gut. I mean, it literally from the mouth to the end, there's a lot of stuff that can start occurring there. So it makes complete sense. But if you find one, send them my way. I'll be happy to speak to them.
Well, that would be great. Well, this has just been wonderful. And, I wish you every success with your growing group of doctors that we had on. They were all wonderful. I mean, I don't think a person could go wrong with any of them.
Thank you. And we really appreciate your support from day one. You've been there for us, and we're very, very thankful for that. So thank you.
Oh, are you kidding? It's my pleasure, because I wish this existed. I've been vegan for 44 years. I mean, God, this would have been a dream. I mean, now people can actually have a vegan or plant-based doctor. And I think everyone should consider getting one, even if you have a local doctor who you love. It's just so great to get this kind of perspective and have somebody kind of overseeing you with the plant-based perspective.
Yeah, and it can be as simple as just, even like I said, one visit a year, just to check in and say, hey, I just wanted to bounce this off of you. And then you have that connection with that doctor. So if things crop up through the year, you can always message them through the portal and then make your appointment as necessary then too. So that's the beautiful thing about it. It's been a blast. I'll tell you, this has been the most hardworking, fun last 2 years of my life.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Marbas, and to all the wonderful doctors at Plant-Based Telehealth.
Thank you so much. And we all say thank you.
Oh, you are so welcome. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when we have another special theme week, True North Health Center week, and we'll kick off the week with the executive chef, Ramses Bravo. Take care, everyone.